Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my ed puzzles that I try to talk really fast and not go super long on. That's okay. We got this. All right, today we're going to talk about Alexander the Great. Woo. All right, your job. You're going to watch this ed puzzle. What? Crazy. Any questions I'll ask you today will be in blue text. You're going to follow along with your study guide. Important concepts on the study guide will be in red text. And of course, if you have questions, please email me or come to office hours because no one ever does. All right, so learning targets. You are going to be able to follow the influence of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle on one another and Alexander the Great. You're going to explain the basics of the Peloponnesian War, explain the rise of the Kingdom of Macedonia, explain who King Philip and Alexander the Great were, and follow the timeline of the Hellenistic Age. Wow, that's a lot. All right, so there are college classes dedicated just to Alexander the Great. Okay, so pretend that like we're taking that class, except we're going to squish like all the really important highlights into 20 minutes. Yay. All right, so have you heard of Alexander the Great before? If so, what do you know about him? All right, so before we get to Alexander the Great, we got to talk about a few things, okay? The first thing will be the Peloponnesian War. Not only is it a really fun word to say, and can I never spell it correctly, but it's also important to Alexander the Great. So, in 431 to 404, so quite a few years before Alex was born, there was this war between Sparta and Persia versus Athens. So, remember last time we talked about how like Persia was like kicking butt, but Athens was kicking butt, but like Sparta and Athens were allies, and Persia was the enemy here. Okay, now the roles kind of change up a little bit. Sparta and Persian have become allies by this point. Okay, so Sparta is like, yo, I can't defeat Persia, so let's be friends. And that's exactly what they did. So Athens builds a giant wall around its territory and city, and it stations its navy ships around the coast. Um, this was very successful to Athens for about 27 years of keeping out the Persians and Spartans until this. Okay, so the Persian Empire. Remember, they're this huge empire. They are rich. So they gave a bunch of funding to the Spartan Navy to be like, here, go build a better ship than Athens. And that's just what they did. Sparta engineered even better ships than the trireme that we talked about last time of Athens. Okay, so Sparta, all of a sudden, they are whooping Athens' butts at their own game, aka Navy ships. So Athens had to surrender to Persia in 404 BCE. Sad. All right, so once again, here's the Persian Empire. Okay, so remember it stretches all the way here on the border of India, goes up here into the Middle East, into Anatolia. Now it is going into Greece as well. Okay, so Greece should all be this light blue color, as well as Egypt. All right, so thanks, Egypt. In 387, the Persian Empire was getting too big to rule. All right, there's just too much land, too many people, too much diversity, too many thoughts and ways to govern things within the Persian Empire. So Egypt's people started rebelling against the Persian rule. So, what did the Persians do? The Persians send the military to Egypt to stop the rebelling. But if Persia sent all their military to Egypt, where is the Persian military not at? That's right. It's not going to be in Greece. So, the rise of Macedonia. So this is called the Kingdom of Macedonia. Here's kind of a picture. So here's a bigger picture of like Europe in the Middle East. So you can see it's just right above Greece. And then here's a little bit more of a zoomed in picture. So again, like Athens is over here, Sparta is like over here somewhere. Yeah. And here's Macedonia. So Macedonia gained military strength while Persia was in Egypt. All right, so the Greek city states had previously not seen Macedonians as true Greeks. They kind of saw them as that outlier, like the Barbaridos that we talked about. Remember that? That's what they thought of the Macedonians. So there's this dude, his name is King Philip of Macedon. He ruled from about 359 to 336 BCE, and he sought to change that thought. He wanted Macedonia to become Greek. He wanted to fit in with the Greek cool kids. Okay? All right, so King Philip, he is a military superpower during this time while Persia is occupied with Egypt. He created something called the Macedonian phalanx. So we talked about in the Battle of Thermopylae the phalanx, right? It's the same concept, but it has some really drastic improvements. So the first one would be less armor and longer spears. So how would less armor and longer spears help his soldiers? That's right. So it is easier to move with less weight. Okay. So that means the army can travel a lot faster and the soldiers aren't going to get tired out as easily. They also had longer spears. That means that the less close range combat. So, like, it wasn't, like the Greek spears were maybe only like 3, 4, or 5 feet long. I mean, these spears were like massive, they're like 12 feet long. They also mixed cavalry, so soldiers on horses, in the infantry, so soldiers on foot. They mixed those two together rather than having them as like kind of separate groups within an army. He also invented something called catapults. Yes, got to smash those walls with those giant rocks. So here's the Macedonian phalanx. You can see here that these spears are gigantic. Like the enemy is not going to get close to them at all. Here's the catapult, throwing stuff. Here's a beautiful gif from Lord of the Rings of a catapult because it's Lord of the Rings. Why not? All right, so again, here's the Greek, and here's the Macedonian. All right, so a little bit more about King Philip. He drove the Persians out of Greece. He also united the Greek states under something called the Confederacy of Corinth. Unfortunately, he had an untimely death. He was assassinated in 336 BCE, and that is when his son Alexander comes to power. Yes, we're talking about this King Philip, not this King Philip. Okay. Two very different King Philips. All right, so is it cool with you that I just call Alexander the Great Alex from now on? I mean, my slide space is precious to me and I don't want to type it out. You better have said yes because that's what I'm doing. You don't have a choice. All right, so before we talk about Alex, we got to learn about some philosophers. All right, so we're going to go way back to 399 BCE Athens. Okay, so there's this dude. He's a philosopher. His name is Socrates. He lived from about 470 to 399. Here's a beautiful, like, romanticized painting of him doing something. Anyway, so what a philosopher is someone who studies and seeks to learn the truths and functions of the world. So he liked hanging around young boys and teaching them philosophy. Like that's all he did all day. Um, and unfortunately, he went on trial because a bunch of people thought that he was corrupting the youth with his philosophical thoughts, and he also didn't believe in the Greek gods. All right, so Socrates argued in return that he was being framed. Some of his students that he would talk to or teach were sons of politicians who wanted to overthrow the Athenian government. But he was found guilty, I suppose, at the end. And he died by drinking hemlock. If you don't know what hemlock is, it is a type of plant. It is poisonous. You can find it in your own backyard. Scary. In the crowd was a devoted student of his. His name was Plato. Here's another romanticized, like Renaissance painting of him. Um, he is actually the one who wrote down all of Socrates' teachings. Without him, we wouldn't know nearly that much about Socrates. And Plato also kind of filled in Socrates' teaching role after he was killed or was forced to kill himself, I guess. So Plato was taught philosophy to his student, um, Aristotle. All right, so Aristotle, he lived from 384 to 322 BCE. Here's a picture of him down here, sitting on like a stool or something. I don't know, whatever. Here's a statue of him. He was actually the tutor of Alex. So he was chosen personally by King Philip to be Alex's tutor because Aristotle was like the epitome of Greek, right? So he'd been taught by like two very great Greek philosophers. So King Philip's like, hey, I got this awesome tutor guy for you, Alex. Go learn from him. So he taught Alex politics, logic, poetry, physics, astronomy, zoology, zoology, there, and much more. All right, so Alex, he became the king of Macedonia, which at this point also includes all of Greece, after his dad was killed. He had one really big goal, and that was to take over the Persian Empire. He wanted revenge against the Persians' invasion of Greece during the Persian Wars. Okay. In 334 BCE, Alex successfully crossed Anatolia and into Mesopotamia, and he and his army absolutely kicked Persia's butt. And by 330 BCE, so only 4 years later, Alex had taken over all of the Persian territory. All right, so once again, okay, so here's a map of the Persian territory. Okay, so remember by India up here through Egypt, over here in Anatolia, Macedonia, Greece, everything. All of this is now under Alex's control. So the Persian Empire is officially dead by 330 BCE, but Alex is a pretty smart dude. He actually keeps former Persian government structure in place. Why would Alex not want to change the former Persian government structure? Yeah, so a change in a government, especially as such a big land area, would be really confusing to not only the residents, but the people who do hold political power. And he was scared this would spark rebellions. He also married several women from Iran for political ties to the Middle East. All right, so Alex, he left the Persian government in place, but one thing he did do very well was spread Greek culture. Because remember, his dad, King Philip, wanted to be like the cool kids and be Greek. Okay. Alex was really successful at spreading that culture. Oh, yeah. And his tutor, Aristotle, was also Athenian. So he was very well versed in Greek culture. So he created Greek like cities outside of Greece to spread Greek influence and culture. So Alex's spreading Greek culture is something called Hellenization. And we'll come back to Hellenization in just a second. So here's a picture of a statue of Nike, who is the goddess of victory. Yes, like the shoe brand, there is a connection there. And this is one of the most famous pieces from the Hellenistic Age. All right, so he didn't just stop at conquering the Persian Empire. His military campaigns went as far in as into Asia, going as far as India, and they stopped right about the Indus River. And the reason that he stopped was not because he was getting like defeated, is because he actually got injured. Because of his injuries, he and his army had to turn back. On his way back, he wasn't doing so hot, so they stopped in the city called Babylon. Remember Babylon? That was from Unit 1. Yes, that city still exists. It still exists today, actually, just under a different name. It's there in Babylon that he dies in the year 323. It is really unknown if it was from natural causes or if he was assassinated. There are like books and historians that will argue that all day long. I don't choose sides, whatever. He was only 32 years old. Think of that. He was 32 and he dominated. I mean, absolutely dominated probably what, like a fifth of the world. Insane. The only downfall is that he had no clear successor to his throne. Here's a cuneiform tablet, by the way. Remember those from Unit 1? Yeah, they're still around at this point. Here's a cuneiform tablet announcing the death of Alex. All right, so remember, this little area right here in yellow is what Alexander inherited. This right here, all of this purpley stuff, that is what he conquered from the Persians plus more. All right, so the Hellenistic Age. So from 323 to 3, or sorry, from 323 to 31 BCE. Okay, so just about 300 years is this period called the Hellenistic Age. So it started with the death of Alex and lasted until the Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar, who we will talk about in the next unit. And occurred throughout North Africa, Western Asia, and Southern Europe, and pretty much anywhere along the Mediterranean. It was art, literature, libraries, universities, language, government structures. All of these were influenced by Greek culture. There were also major cities named and modeled off of Alex. We'll talk about one in just a second. And Athens became like a giant museum and tourist destination, just like it is today. So when you think like, oh, I'm going to Greece, you probably think like, oh, you're going to go to Athens and look at all the old stuff. Well, guess what? They did this too over 2,000 years ago. So Athens has been like a living museum for like 2,000 years. And here is a marble statue made for the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. She's going to be a part of the Hellenistic Age. We'll talk about more about her in the Rome unit. All right, so Alexandria, Egypt. Can you guess who this city is named after? Yeah, that's right. It's named after Alex. So Alex modeled the city before his death, so he wanted the city to be built. It is located on the western branch of the Nile in the Mediterranean Sea. So great for trade through the Nile and also the sea. So it is the major city in all of the Mediterranean, Africa, Europe, and Asia. Okay, so like this is the place to go. All right. It also had a population of about 500,000 people, which is extremely large for that time. Here's some ruins of like an old theater in Alexandria. All right, so Alexandria, Egypt. Please summarize this on your notes. Don't write all of this down, okay? So in Alexandria, Egypt, they had museums of Greek art and also Alex's history. They had universities studying astronomy, physics, math, music, philosophy, and a whole bunch more. They had this thing called the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which is this big lighthouse that could be seen off the Mediterranean Sea over 30 miles away. That had libraries with hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls. So I know we talked about cuneiform tablets before. So what papyrus scrolls are, they're like paper. They're made of papyrus trees. So they're not as durable as cuneiform tablets were, but they're a whole heck a lot easier to store. Um, there's this thing called the Library of Alexandria. It is this public library. So that means anybody could walk in and check out materials. You did not have to be a scholar or someone rich. Um, so there's a lot of debate of either if the library actually burned down or if there was some other cause. The most likely cause is that it was not burned, but actually that the materials were scattered around the Mediterranean and the building just became neglected over time and reduced to rubble. Another really interesting thing about Alexandria, Egypt, it had a very large Jewish population, and the Jews were able to have their own governing bodies within the city, according to the religion. All right, so Hellenistic Age. Greek influence, Alex's legacy, and combining of territories would pave the way to the Roman Empire, which we'll talk about in Unit 4. Woo! Here's a beautiful statue of Caesar, but not like the pizza. All right, so next up, there's an optional but a very highly recommended Kahoot to review for the test. And then once you're done with that, or if you choose to skip over it, but I highly suggest you don't, you're going to take the Unit 3 test. Okay? I'm sorry that it's a test. I couldn't think of a project for you this time around. I'll try to think of a project instead of a test for Unit 4 Roman Empire. If you have any suggestions of fun projects you want to be done, let me know. I can totally take those into consideration. And of course, if you have questions, comments, or complaints about this being so long, you can email me or come to my office hours because no one ever does. Haha, just kidding. I know a lot of you are in school during that time, so it's all good. It's all good. You can stop and say hi. All right. That's all I got for you. I hope you have a great day, and I hope this wasn't too long. Bye.